Before we talk about how to do Ajax in jQuery, we should say, what is Ajax to begin with and why do we want it? Well, the term Ajax was first coined by Jesse James Garrett. Now, he didn't invent the technology. He invented the acronym standing for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Now, that was a very catchy acronym. The problem is that nowadays, XML is not usually the data format used to send data back and forth between the server. You often send either simple strings or JSON. We'll talk about both of these things. You still sometimes send XML, but not predominantly. And so the X part of the acronym is frequently wrong, and the A part of the acronym, asynchronous, is occasionally wrong. Sometimes you do it synchronously. So nowadays, most people just say Ajax is the way JavaScript talks to the server, gets something back, and updates the page, and they write it as Ajax with a capital A, not Ajax all in uppercase. In other words, not really as an acronym, just as a term that means the way JavaScript talks to the server, gets back data, and does something with it in the page. All right, so that's what kind of Ajax means, but why do we want it? Well, first we need to talk about, well, why are we doing web apps in the first place? You know, after all, web apps are really not very good. First of all, HTML is not really a very good graphical display language, especially for interactive graphics. So why are we using HTML when it's really all about documents and pages, not about interactive programs? And why are we using HTTP? That's not a very good protocol for communicating back and forth between a browser and a server, at least not a very good protocol based on the way nowadays we use web applications. So why are we doing something where the display language is poor and the communication protocol is poor? Well, that's a good question. And just to give you a little hint, I'm perhaps one of the only people that when I travel around the world, I take pictures of internet cafes. So I often go to many different countries to teach training courses for companies on building web applications. And while I'm there, I usually head off to the provinces, and whenever I see an internet cafe, I take a picture of it. Why do I take a picture of it? Why does that give you a hint why people want web applications when HTML is not very good and HTTP is not very good? Well, the reason is you can access it anywhere. I can be off in some remote town, in some remote island, and I can drive my motorbike up to an internet cafe, and I've done this many times, log into Gmail, which is not just a web application, but an Ajax-enabled web application, and they don't have to have any other special software installed. If they have a browser, I can access it. Not only that, I don't have to keep running annoying updates. And the reason for that is every time you access Gmail, the program comes from the server. And most of the program lives on the server. I don't install the program locally on my computer and then have to update it every so often. The interface for it gets sent to me every time, and the main application lives on the server. And so here are some other internet cafes that I've taken pictures of, or that someone's taken a picture of me in front of. And the point is that I can be at any of those places and I can access the web. I can access my Gmail because it was a web application. All right, so that's why we want web apps, because you can get to them from anywhere and because you get updates for free. You get updates every time. And I want to stress that this doesn't necessarily have to apply to the internet as a whole. It can apply to your intranet as well. If you want an application that any random employee in your company can access without having to install something special ahead of time, a web application is a good choice. All right, so we want web apps, but why do we want Ajax, JavaScript that talks to the server, gets some data back, and updates the page? Well, there are three major problems with web apps. One is, in a traditional web app, the only way to get a change is to reload the entire page. So that's very coarse-grained. You had to reload the whole page, even if only a small thing changed. Secondly, and perhaps even worse, is you are stuck waiting while that reload is happening. You can't be interacting with part of the page while the page is reloading. So it's a synchronous operation. And furthermore, if you think about what GUI controls are available in HTML and you count on your fingers, you almost don't run out of fingers before you run out of controls. There's text areas, there's text fields, there's buttons, there's checkboxes, there's radio buttons, there's menus, there's list boxes. I'm almost out. Now there's a few other minor ones, but that's just about it. There just isn't very much in terms of gathering information from the user or displaying information to the user built into HTML, because HTML was originally designed for text, not for interactive programs. So Ajax tries to fix those three problems. But it tries to fix those three problems with what a browser already has installed. What does a browser already support? Well, guess what? We've covered those three things. A browser already supports HTML. It already supports CSS. It already supports JavaScript. That's it. If you relied on a browser plugin, then you wouldn't be portable. Now, this in some ways is kind of a kludgy hack. It's using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in ways it wasn't originally designed for. But the kind of real solutions, embedding a real program in the browser, didn't catch on. So the first attempt was Java. Now, Java is widely used. Java, in fact, is the most widely used programming language in the world. But it's not used anymore, or very much anymore, for content in the browser itself. It typically is used either for content on the server is running Java, or content in a phone. Android phones are written in Java, and the applications are written in Java. So you can't count on the end user's computer having Java installed. So Java applets are just not a good solution. Nobody uses them anymore. And even if Java was installed on the end user's computer, the Java applet is kind of self-contained. It can't interact with the HTML and the rest of the page. So Java applets were kind of a hot idea at the very beginning that got interest in Java rolling, but that's not how Java is applied nowadays, and that's not a good solution for making web pages more interactive in a portable manner. Now, Flash and Flex were a pretty serious contender in this game, because Flash and Flex were not universally installed, but were widely installed. The big problem nowadays is people use mobile phones a lot, and in particular, the iOS applications, phones and tablets, don't support Flash. So, Flash is not a replacement for Ajax. It's not a good enough solution because it's not portable enough. Now, people have tried to come along later and do what Java applets did in a better way, Microsoft Silverlight, JavaFX, but the problem is that they're just not that widely installed. You can't assume the vast majority of end users out there in the world in random places, or the vast majority of end users inside your company, have either one of these installed. So you need to stick with what's already in a browser, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and that's what Ajax is about. Okay, so if you think of an ordinary traditional web app, you didn't get updates very often, but when you did, the entire page had to reload. So even if only one thing in the page was going to change, when you submitted a form or you pressed a button, it went to the server and you got back an entire new web page, even if only one little piece of text in the web page had changed, and you sat around twiddling your thumbs while you were waiting for that web page to arrive. With Ajax, you have small updates, possibly frequently. And so the idea is you're looking at a web page, and behind the scenes, JavaScript makes a network connection to the server and gets something back that JavaScript inserts into the page in some way. But the user is not sitting and waiting. The entire web page is not being reloaded, and because it's asynchronous, the user can be interacting with part of the web page while some other small piece of the web page gets updated. All right, perhaps the most famous example that everybody's familiar with Ajax is the Google homepage. You go to the Google homepage and you type in an M. You get a drop-down menu under the text field of popular queries that start with the letter M. And you type another letter, and it keeps refining that list, popular queries that start with what you've typed in so far. Well, this is small-grained updates. It's synchronous, and it has extra user interface control. So let me elaborate. It's small-grained in the sense that the entire page doesn't have to reload, just the little drop-down menu has to reload. Secondly, it's asynchronous. If you're on a slow network connection and you type too fast, and Google, which is reading it in JavaScript, sending it to the server, which reads the result in Java, talks to the database and sends something back, if Google can't keep up because you're on a slow network connection, then you can just type ahead. You don't have to wait for the drop-down menu for the second character to arrive before you type in the third character. You can just go ahead and keep typing. So you're not frozen waiting for the result to come. But if you're on a fast network connection, those hints, those suggestions are extremely useful and wildly popular. So it's a small-grained update, it's asynchronous, and I said, it's a drop-down menu under a text field. Well, there are no such things as drop-down menus hooked to text fields in HTML. Google made such a thing with a combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So fine-grained updates, asynchronous, extra user interface controls that are not part of standard HTML. All right, so if you go to Indeed.com and you look at job postings in the last 10 years that have contained certain keywords, you'll see that Java is the most popular one. And remember that this is in percent, so the exact ups and downs are not so important. What matters is the relative listings. And you look at several other popular programming languages, and you look at Ajax. You see that Ajax grew in popularity and is now right in the mainstream with most programming languages. Now, of course, Java or C# or something like that will always be used more than Ajax because Ajax applications have to talk to the server, and the server is running PHP or C# or Ruby or Java or something like that. So these things work together. But the point is that Ajax is mainstream. It's not a fad that's going to die off. People are so used to it now because Facebook and Twitter and Google and the applications they normally use make use of it, that if you went back and built a web application the old-fashioned way, where the only way to get an update is to reload an entire page, users just wouldn't be satisfied anymore. So you can be confident that at least for the moderate foreseeable future, in web applications, JavaScript talking to the server and updating the page interactively will continue to be used, and JavaScript and Ajax techniques will not become obsolete. All right, you could do the same thing by looking at salary values. Now, I'm a little dubious about these exact numbers because, after all, Ajax involves JavaScript programming. So to say that Ajax jobs pay worse than JavaScript jobs is perhaps a little questionable. But the point is that both with the availability of jobs and with the salary of jobs, Ajax is right in the thick of things with other languages and other ways of doing web applications. It's not a fad. It's not going to go away.